presentation is Library at Home with Koha. And unfortunately, Rhonda Kuiper, who was supposed to be part of this presentation, was not here because of her injury to her, was it leg? Yeah. So, but we do have her cohorts online, Carol Farley and is it Saldana?
Saldana.
Okay. And they are online and they are going to be doing the presentation, and apparently Bob is driving. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Sal.
And I'm Carol.
And we're with the Round Rock Library. And today we're going to present to you Library at Home with Koha. So
next slide.
Next
please.
slide. Getting the word out. So Round Rock Public Library started a home delivery service just over 2 years ago. They hired me to do the deliveries. We got a decommissioned surveillance van from the Round Rock Police Department, and we had a shiny new module in Koha to help us track our patrons and deliveries. All we needed was a way to identify Round Rock citizens to deliver to. To get the word out, we added a page on our website to describe the new service. We created flyers in English and Spanish to distribute both in the library and in the community, and we promoted Library at Home on our social media channels. Carol joined me last December to help, and we will share with you how from this beginning, we have grown this service to what we have today with the help of the Housebound module and some custom reports in Koha, with an eye on making this service scalable for the future growth. We have modified the service, including a name change from Homebound Delivery to Library at Home. Next slide, please.
Oh. My fault, just a second. Okay.
Here we have some of our statistics, which shows the beginning of our growth from 5 deliveries and 10 items delivered in July of 2021 up to last month, which has grown to 311 deliveries, 698 titles or items delivered as of August 2023. And you see a little dip in January 2023. That's because we were closed for moving into our new library. So we ceased all deliveries for that time being. Next slide, please. And here's a look at our growth of our number of patrons. The first month we had 3, and last month we grew all the way to 206 people in our program in a little more than 2 years. Next slide, please. So this is a little snapshot of our demographics of who we serve. We have 10 facilities that we deliver to with 128 active clients and 37 inactive clients. We have 20 active individuals and 18 inactive, and we have 3 families also, for a total of 55 inactive patrons out of the 206. Next slide, please. Here's a few fun facts that we have to present to you. We originally got the van with 1,800 miles on it and pretty low for a 2009 model. But once again, go figure, it was set up as a surveillance van. So it just sat and, you know, surveilled people. Since then, we put over 6,200 miles on the van, and 91% of our patrons are over 65. 17% are actually over 90. Our patrons' age range is from 36 to 102. Our families include children from toddlers to teens. 3 of our patrons prefer Spanish language or bilingual resources. Our first patron has checked out 405 books since July 2021. Our first family has checked out 896 items. Next slide, please. Responding to growth. How has our system evolved? We've had an increase in patrons, which resulted in an increase in staff, which is where Carol comes in. We've had to become more reliant on the module to share and retain information, since most of that information was originally in my brain and I needed a way to share that with Carol. So we've had to tweak and change existing reports and create new ones. Next slide, please.
So the program used the Homebound module from the beginning with the intention that the service would grow. So we were planning ahead for that. Patron accounts were set up with details filled in, and reports were created in response to that growth in services that we had to facilities. So we needed to establish more rigid rules for recording patron details. We wanted to make sure that all of that was consistent and easier information to share with other staff and to share between us. So these are our best practices for filling in the fields for patron preferences. So here you see housebound details for Wilma Test. We've already set up her delivery day and frequency, Wednesday every 2 weeks. The first field that we fixed and made into a more rigid strategy was materials. So there we're going to record what materials she prefers. She likes large print 2 at a time. We tend to write it in the same format every time we write it. And you can put whatever materials there, whether she gets playaways or magazines, and then, you know, how many at a time. That next field, subjects, are typically genre labels that we use in our library or standard subject terms that are helpful if you're doing an advanced search. But sometimes we'll use a patron's particular descriptions of subjects if it provides useful information. So hysterical and historical women or latest and greatest are some examples of memorable ones that help us keep a patron's personality in mind when we're checking out books for them. We swiped some really great ideas from another system. Jackson County Library System in Medford, Oregon has a delivery service that's via mail. And they had a fairly structured approach to how they stored information about authors that we just stole wholesale. We started keeping track of positive and negative responses to authors. So here you see that Wilma likes Jane Austen and Agatha Christie. Under her low-rated authors, she really doesn't like Barbara Delinsky or James Patterson, so we want to be sure we never bring her James Patterson. We started adding an X after the author's name when a patron had worked their way completely through an author's whole, I can't think of the word, when they made it completely through all of the books by that author that we had in the library. We'll also put the date. That way, if there are new releases for that author or new additions to a series, we'll know that they haven't read it yet if it's something that comes in after that date. Something we've been playing around with is adding a place to put possible authors to try down below the low rated. So we've been listing read-alike authors or anyone that we think might be a good choice for that particular patron. We keep track of where patrons found out about our program in the referral field. We also know the facility name if the patron lives in one. So there you see that Wilma found out about us from Meals on Wheels, and she lives in Testville. Notes is for any information that's complicated and requires a lot more explanation. So time-sensitive information, we try to make sure we've got a date in there when we record the note. Next slide, please. So early in the program, the need for facility reports became apparent. So that was set up fairly early on. We created facility reports by using location addresses to sort patrons by facility. Unfortunately, our original plan of taking the laptop out into the field with us to all the facilities didn't work out real well. There's limited internet access frequently in a lot of these facilities. A lot of times cell phones can't get service when you're inside of a facility. So we couldn't even set up a hotspot. So we had to rely from the get-go on paper reports, and that reliance on paper is still apparent. But developing the reports to be more functional has helped us work smarter, not harder, which is Sal's mantra. We've noticed some benefits from doing that. Reader's advisory is the most significant time commitment when we're doing this process. So updating and organizing the patron's preferences has helped us provide greater customer service by making it faster and easier to make good selections. Adjusting our reports and our workflow has helped us tremendously with time management. We can work well ahead, planning ahead for staff vacations, holiday closures, special events, conventions, if people are going to not be in the office. So we can work out, I think for next week, we may have worked through Tuesday deliveries. There may still be a little bit of work left to do, but by the end of this week, I will have worked through several more of our facilities so that they're ready to go. Placing items on hold eliminates checkout errors and saves time. We're actually checking them out manually back here and not really using a scanner. Sometimes we'll still need to make last minute changes or select new items kind of on the fly, but this is happening less frequently as we find new ways to make the reports work for us. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about workflow. Our workflows evolved from a system that required a lot more writing. We still print out a report and we do make notes all over it during the whole process, but a lot more of our delivery prep happens in Koha before we ever print it out. So this is a sample report for Testville. The first two boxes on the left there are where we physically check off that we've scheduled a future delivery for each patron and check their books out to them later on in the prep process. We don't actually do anything with those boxes in Koha. They're just for our convenience. The card number column has a link to the patron's account. You can just click and open it up. The checkouts column shows any books currently checked out to the account. Expires on, serves as a reminder to us to renew cards that are close to expiration. Titles on hold, but still on the shelf in the library will show up in the holds to be pulled column. Holds waiting here displays any titles returned that generate a hold slip and are then waiting for us on our H-bound hold shelf. And then borrower notes displays information we've put in the patron's circulation notes to indicate patrons who do their own holds are inactive for whatever reason, need withdrawn books due to memory issues, or are only using electronic resources. We'll also sometimes put very short notes to remind us to talk to a patron about any issues that might come up. Next slide. So to work on selecting books and scheduling deliveries for a particular patron, Sal and I work pretty much the same way. There may be differences, but Koha is very flexible, so you can adjust your workflow to be something that makes more sense to you personally. But this is generally what we do. We open two more tabs in addition to the report tab, the patron's circulation history and their housebound tab. We'll start by scheduling the next delivery in the housebound tab using the Add a Delivery button, which you see down there on the in the middle panel on the bottom. You just click that and follow the directions. There's a bunch of drop-down menus that you can fill in for date and who chose and who's delivering. Sorry, my lights just turned themselves off. That was distracting. Okay. So we use the details on that page, the housebound details, to make decisions about choosing items based on the client's preferences. And we also use information from their circulation history so we can make a curated selection for them. Circulation history is searchable. There's up at the top, I've circled where the search box is. It's searchable and sortable, so you can filter your search all kinds of time-saving ways. So filtering and sorting circulation history by author, title, checkout date, call number, that can all provide useful information to avoid duplicating checkouts. You can notice themes or series that are happening with your patron. And you can also notice anytime a patron has missed a delivery, because you can see that they checked out a book and turned it in on the same day. That probably means they weren't there to pick up the book. We can also consult paperwork from previous deliveries, so we can see if we've missed or had a declined delivery. But our focus on updating and doing our homework when we get back after going out on delivery, it means that that information is all pretty much in the patron's account record. Next slide, please. So there are several ways to place holds for the patrons. I'm just going to describe my favorite way to do it. I like to use the search to hold function. That's located in the top row of buttons on any of the Koha patron pages. And that will take you to an advanced search that you can fill in and search hundreds of different ways. That will generate a list of results with an option to place each of the items on hold for that patron at the bottom of each entry. That's the center panel there. I've circled where that link is. If you want more information about a specific item, if you just click on the title, it'll take you to just that item page. And there's a drop-down menu where you can, again, place a hold specifically for your patron that you're currently working on. So that's just one way. There's all kinds of ways to get there. If you're working in the reports and have them open, that'll just save a little time. Next slide, please. So after working on each patron's selections, we like to refresh the report repeatedly. That way you can make sure that the holds populate the holds to be pulled column of the report before you move on to the next patron. It's easier to just check your work immediately so that you don't waste time later. So sometimes it can take a few minutes for that holds to be pulled column to populate. So you might just need to wait a couple minutes. Sometimes if you've selected something and it's all of a sudden become unavailable, somebody else checked it out, for example, then you'll just have to make another selection because it just will never populate. Holds waiting here displays anything, again, that's already been pulled and is waiting for us on our H-bound holds shelf. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit more about holds waiting here and how we set that up. Holds on items that other patrons have checked out that our patrons are waiting on will populate that holds waiting here column just as soon as they're returned. So we've used H-bound with a hyphen as the beginning of the last names for all of our program participants. This way, when a hold slip is generated, public services can easily recognize the holds coming in for library at home patrons. So we have a dedicated stream of books going to our hold shelf. This usually will happen more often with popular titles or titles that are waitlisted or book club titles. If we have a patron working their way through a series, we might have set up some holds well in advance and they'll start trickling in over time. So on the screen there, you see that our van that we've named Vendetta has checked out, are we there yet? She put it on hold and somebody else had it checked out. So when it came back, it generated this H-bound data, comma, van slip, and there's her book. So next slide, please. So the finished report here. In this finished report, the holds to be pulled and the holds waiting here columns show all of the selections that we've made for each patron. So I've got it up there on the screen for you to see. You can see that in the borrower notes, the first person, Vendetta, does her own holds. So that's possibly how her Are We There Yet ended up as a hold waiting here. Beulah is inactive, so we didn't make any selections for her. Ralph Test, we would have scheduled a delivery for, but there's no selections in the holds to be pulled column because we're going to take him some weeded books. And Wilma Test has decided that she would like to only get ebooks, so we're not going to bring her anything. So we like to check over and make sure everybody who should have a delivery is scheduled with something in their holds to be pulled or their holds waiting here column, and that it's an appropriate choice. So at that point, we'll print it out and use the report to pull and check out the books to our clients. Since those holds are all for a specific client, we can avoid accidentally checking out a title to the wrong person. The checkout column, in this one, I've gone ahead and filled something in for you to look at. That shows any titles a patron already has in their possession. We can keep track of the due dates on there because it's listed when that book is due. And we can also highlight it if we feel like we need to get it back, if it's on hold for somebody else, for example, or they've had it a really long time and it's long past due. We might want to check in with them and see if we can't get it back. Next slide, please. So let's turn our attention to some of our individual patron problems. Our service to these patrons has developed much differently than we expected. The original idea was that there were assigned delivery days to quadrants of the city. That's fallen by the wayside, and we've relaxed into more of an on-demand service. So they'll contact us for deliveries, or we contact them when holds come in and we're going to be just in their area. The quadrant delivery model might be a strategy for later as our program grows, but for right now, it's really not necessary. But we did recognize a need for a way to keep individual patrons from slipping through the cracks. Quickly finding out if they've put anything on hold or seeing if they have books due or past due lets us know when they might be needing a delivery service or pickup. The holds to pull for individual reports and the homebound holds due in the next 3 days report is our way of checking on our individual patrons. And it's the beginning of a strategy for planning for growth in this demographic. Next slide, please. So holds placed by our library at home patrons do not show up in the holds to pull report for the rest of the library patrons. We pull our own holds. We started out with a holds to pull for homebound report, but it included all of our patrons. This was not really helpful since we always use facility reports to organize our facility deliveries. So we needed a new report. The way we did this is we just used the old report and excluded patrons living in facilities by excluding their addresses within the report language. That created the holds to pull for individuals reports. So it's useful for knowing right away when a patron has put something on hold that's currently on the shelf. Otherwise, we might not know about it if they haven't notified us. We can contact them immediately to schedule a delivery. A report with no results will mean that there are no deliveries for individuals right now, and we're all caught up. So I went ahead and filled this one in with one of my Testville patrons. And you can see that it's got her name, the card number with a link so you can go directly to checkout, item call number, the author's name and title, and the barcode, which is useful for if you have a book that you've got multiple titles, you want to be sure and take the one that's actually assigned to that client. Let's see. I think that's all I had to say about that. Next slide, please. So the homebound books due report has helped us notice when a patron hasn't been in contact for a while. So some of our patrons want deliveries almost weekly or even more often if we'd let them. And they're in constant contact with us. Others need a little more time and prefer less frequent visits. So if we don't hear from someone, it's possible for them to fall off of our radar. If they show up on the books due report, they're probably ready for a new delivery. And we can contact them and offer to schedule delivery or pickup, or we can see if they need some help renewing titles. Many of our patrons find it difficult to log into their accounts and manage things like renewing books. So we're happy to help them with that. Another valuable feature of this report is that we can use it to avoid causing patron anxiety about automated notices for our facility clients. Because we deliver every 2 weeks and most items have an automatic 3-week checkout, books will sometimes be due a week before the next delivery. So this report serves as a reminder to renew those books before notices go out. We try to also keep on top of that as part of our homework at the end of a delivery. We'll check to see if somebody's going to have books due before we come back again, and we can manually change the date for when their book is due and go ahead and make them renew the book for them so that they don't have to worry about it. We've actually had a patron figure out how to make her way to the library to return a book because she was so stressed out by getting an automated notice. So even though we tell them not to worry about those, or sometimes we'll see if we can't just go ahead and turn them off for a particular client, a lot of times they'll be stressed out about it and they'll want to bring them back anyway. Let's see. So this one is just blank. I couldn't figure out a way to show you what it looks like, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Next slide, please. So with our personalized reader's advisory and book selection delivery, we tend to think of ourselves as book concierges. Relying on Koha to help keep us organized makes it possible to deliver this kind of excellent customer service more consistently. Our experience of taking a closer look at Koha reports and adjusting the way we use them has convinced us there's other strategies that will help us if we can only think them up. So we intend to keep thinking creatively about how we can use information and reports available in Koha to ensure that our program is scalable without sacrificing that quality of service. That's really important to Sal and I both. With that in mind, we've been thinking about ways to use email and text tools for delivery notification, taking the opportunity to create special default settings for our library at home patrons where that kind of communication is appropriate. We do have skilled nursing patrons who don't have email or phones that we wouldn't be able to communicate in that way, but We have a lot of other people that like to text and email with us, and it might be nice to be able to have automation of some of the repetitive notifications that we need to send out. Having the ability to schedule recurring deliveries for facilities would save us a lot of time. We schedule them for each patron delivery as we're selecting the titles for them. But it would be nice to simply set up recurring delivery once when we create their account, for example, for a particular facility, or if we had the option to schedule batch deliveries for a facility. That would save a lot of time. We'd really like to have a way to keep Koha reading lists for specific patrons in their homebound page or on some other page within their account. That would save a lot of time when we're selecting books. When we have somebody who's really particular, it's nice to have a list of books to choose from that we think that they're going to like, instead of having to come up with that list every time we schedule. So we've experimented around with some strategies. We've got some private lists in Aspen. We've set up private lists in Koha for a particular location or a specific genre, but it's a little difficult to use those effectively because they're hard for us to share without making them public lists, and we'd like them to be private lists. We've been experimenting a little bit with suspended holds in a patron's account to serve as a personalized reading list, but that's still in the experimental stage, and it's a little bit unwieldy. So it's not ideal. But we feel like the flexibility of Koha makes us feel like anything's possible. We're looking forward to coming up with new ideas and new strategies to help us grow. Next slide, please.
So if you've seen, this is how we use Koha to make our connections. We communicate with each other as a team using Koha. We've maintained our connections and developed our relationships with our patrons. We provide excellent customer service through Koha, and our patrons feel heard, important, and part of the community. Next slide, please. Here's some feedback from our patrons in their own words. My personal favorite is the bottom left-hand corner from Miss Chapa. She was our very first patron in the program, and she said during a news media piece, he doesn't just bring me books, he brings me hope. It kind of brings tears to my eyes every time I read that, so very special. Next slide, please.
So we've only covered the ways that we use the homebound module with facilities and with individual patrons, and not any of the information about setting up your own account. So if you want more information about the initial setup for your library of a homebound service through Koha, there's some videos you can look at. A couple of years ago, Rhonda and Sal did a presentation when they first set up the service that we have now. And there's a video of that delivery service for people with limited transportation options. Monday Minutes Deep Dive has a deep dive about the housebound module. That's that second link. And there's a more recent video that PTFS Europe Limited did about setting up a Koha housebound module. They use the reports a little bit differently, which I found interesting. And so there may be some other ideas for setting up how you do deliveries that are more recent developments. Next slide, please. So if you have questions or comments that you want to get in touch with us after the convention's over, this is our contact information, but we'd like to open the floor up for any questions if you have questions that you'd like to ask us about how we do what we do.
Hi, I'm Mary from Denver, Texas. And I had a question. If a patron is a homebound patron, do they have the option to actually come into the library if they have transportation, or do they just have to stay in that particular patron category?
They can still come into the library. We set them up with, it's basically a library card, just like anybody else. The only thing different that really happens for them is their holds are directed to us. So if they wanted to put something on hold and pick it up in the library, it might be a little confusing, but we'd figure it out. We've had people come in and pick up their holds instead of waiting for us to deliver them. But yeah, they're otherwise welcome to come into the library.
This is Lee from the New Hampshire State Library. I was just curious, as in New Hampshire, we have as sort of part of the state library, it's called Talking Books for blind and visually handicapped. Do you have that in your state? And or do you have you ever thought about sort of collaborating with that to deliver that to, I'm assuming, since a lot of your population is elderly.
So we do share information about Texas State Library has that program, and we can share that information with any of our patrons if they're interested in it. We do have some overlap too. There's some of our facilities where there are patrons who get those kinds of materials, and I think it's all through the Texas State Library. We also will take playaways to our clients. We have some patrons who were really sad when our books on CD collection went away. And so Sal and Rhonda came up with an idea to have speakers that they could connect the playaways to, so that they could listen to books through speakers, because it becomes difficult if you have hearing aids to use earbuds, or even some kinds of headphones will cause feedback problems. So that's kind of like a little pilot program that we started. There's one facility that we've got 4 or 5 people who've checked out these speakers that they can connect their playaways to. That's a good question.
One of your presentation really struck me, noticing when we haven't heard from a regular patron. Have you ever campaign or you within policy or something to send, you call the police and send them around to make sure they're still okay? Or that's too far out of your scope? Speaking as someone who's send police out for one of my dogs.
We haven't had to do that, but before I started working here, Sal's involved with a group that I recently joined too. That's It Takes a Village, and it's a bunch of people who have different functions they serve within the city of Round Rock. So there's somebody from the fire department, somebody from Parks and Recreation, some of the utility people. And there are people who live in our city who can fall through the cracks. So we will sometimes share a little bit of information about our patrons to get them some help. Sal, did you want to?
Yeah, it's that's part of the other reason we called it It Takes a Village, because there are certain patrons that the fire department had that we didn't have in our system yet. And actually several of our first patrons came from the fire department community risk unit, and he would go around and do the smoke detectors and stuff in there. And he was like, hey, there's a few patrons that, you know, that might be interested. Patrons was from them, and then vice versa. Whenever like we go into people's houses and we see that there might be something that they can, you know, help and take care of, that we also refer them to the other city departments, so that way they can get the resources that they need. And we are in contact with the police department, also the this, I forgot what the program is called, but they basically have like a lockbox system, and then also they install peepholes for the elderly, so that in case they do need some help, they have that lockbox outside of their door, so that the police don't have to break down the door when they're doing a welfare check on them. So we also offer that as well to them, and then also they can get signed up on a daily phone call service through that same police department unit, and that way they call daily and get phone checks on them. So if y'all don't have that in y'all's community, maybe that's a great idea to get started to partner with your police department.
So we always bring along resources and information that we can share. So when we notice a situation,
Different flyers for the other people that we service. So that's the other way of partnering with some of the other groups that we go with. We say, hey, do you have any flyers that maybe our patrons might be interested in? And then we give them our flyers as well. So that's the way we partner with some of our other groups that we do deal with, is that we, spread the word about their resources. Like I said, Meals on Wheels is very near and dear to my heart because a lot of our individuals get meals from Meals on Wheels. So there's a couple that don't get it, and so we've given their flyers to them, so they always have that option to sign up if they want.
Laura Horgan, Middlesex. I just had a personal question. Just wondering about, would you ever look for materials like outside of your own institution and request things from another library? If a patron had an interest and you'd already gone through your 6 copies of a particular author, but you knew that other people in the area might have them?
Yes, we've done that before. We've done interlibrary loan for patrons who really want to read a particular book that we just don't have any way to get to them. So we're kind of careful with that service. For example, we wouldn't want to offer it to memory care patients necessarily, because there's so much time involved in getting the books back, and there can be fees and things. So if we can figure out a way to do it without it costing anything, that's paramount to us, because we don't want to make our patrons pay for it. Most of them wouldn't be able to pay fees. So yeah, if we can work it, we're happy to bend over backwards to come up with the book for them, and really feel like that's part of our job. So yes, we would do that.
Another thing that I've done is I've done purchase suggestions on their behalf. I'll log into their account and make a purchase suggestion. And there's been times where we've gotten the book, and there's other times that we haven't, based off of the collection developers, see of a need for it. So that's another option that we've done before too.
Christopher Corlane, I just wanted to, out of curiosity, I know you mostly delivering, but do you use any other methods of delivery to get things into their hands besides just driving to their homes?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear your question.
I was wondering if you use any other methods of delivery besides driving to their homes. Are you doing mailings, or doing other kind of methods?
Not through this service. Our library does participate in interlibrary loans, so I know that there are librarians who are mailing things to other places, but our service is specifically for delivery and pickup.
Hi, Alex at RCLS. I used to do home visits for library purposes. I'm curious, do you have strategies for those patrons who want to chat for an hour, or perhaps have you addressed?
Yes, yes, we do. So for some of them, we actually will build in a little bit of time. If we've got somebody who's kind of wordy, we'll make sure that we have a little bit of time to give to them. But one of the ways that we'll handle it is we'll have things scheduled right after them. So we can give them a few minutes and have a nice conversation. And then, oh, we have to go. We have some more deliveries. We don't want those people to be disappointed. And most of the time we can get away quickly. I mean, there are a couple that it's much more complicated. One of the ways that's really helpful for us to get out is that we do deliveries together for the most part. So especially in a facility where we're in the library and the patrons are coming to us, sometimes one or the other of us will get trapped in a conversation. So there's somebody else who can help the other patrons, and also somebody else who can help extricate you from that situation. So it works really well to go as a team.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Nick from Bywater. You mentioned that you had to report to remind you to renew books for the patrons that were out for them.
Yes.
I was curious if you had considered using auto renewal or just setting up different cert rules for these patrons so that their books go out for a longer period.
So I have considered that. I needed something right away, and that was fast for me to make. Those options, I think I'd have to talk to supervisors about. So yes, I want to do that. I want auto renewal for them, and that would save so much time and so much stress. And I want to change their requirements. I mean, their settings for how they receive notifications as well. But I had run across that, and I was like, oh, why aren't we doing that? So yes, 100%, we want to do that.
So to add on to that, so one thing that I do that some of the other librarians in the library had taught me was that you can do a specific date that it's due. So sometimes I know some of our patrons, because I've had them for a little longer than Carol, so I know who needs a little more time. So if I have a little extra time when we're doing the checkout, I will go in and manually check them out to them, but I will kind of change the due date and give them a couple of extra weeks, or I'll see, okay, this is a new book, you know, it's due in 2 weeks, but I know they're gonna need more time, so I will give them a 4-week checkout. So that's my little secret there for some of our patrons that I do.
Any questions? Did we have anything online? No.
No.
Okay.
Last thing online is something about mapping.
All right, I think we're done with the questions.
Well, we don't really have any more comments. I hope you all will contact us with any more questions. If you want copies of anything, I can send you our procedures manual that tells the steps for going through the reports. We built something because we realized that we needed kind of like a doom file for if we had a perfect storm, because we recently did, where Rhonda was out, Sal had an emergency, and then the very next day I had an emergency, and deliveries were scheduled, but there was nobody who understood how to do what we do. So we have worked on updating our procedures manual so that anybody can pick it up and see what they're supposed to do, and then, you know, hopefully do it. So if you'd like copies of those kinds of things, just let me know. You can email me at cfarley@roundrocktexas.gov. And I don't really have any more comments. Sal? No, I guess not.
All right, thank you, Sal and Carol. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.